Hey, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Robert Klein, one of the general managers within the Go AZ Motorcycle Group. First of all, thank you all for coming out on the middle of an afternoon, and well, at least we have nice weather today, so we won't talk about the rain of late. But thanks for all coming out. Appreciate it. We've brought in a special guest directly from Ducati to tell you a little bit more about the motorcycle. Hopefully, you guys can get all your questions answered for those who have any. Before I turn it over, though, to Jeff, I'd like to remind all of you and let all of you know that if you are not aware, coming up on April 10th, we are doing a Adventure Rider Summit here in the dealership. It is basically kind of the first of its kind. It is an Adventure Rider Summit, meaning we're inviting you in to give us your feedback on what you would like. For those that are into the adventure riding scene and those type of things, we're just looking for some more feedback on what we can do to be a better dealership and help you folks out as much as we can in that. So, without further ado, I'll introduce Jeff Brooks from Ducati. Jeff, you're all here.
Thank you very much. Again, I'm Jeff Brooks. I'm from Ducati North America, and I'm a regional business manager for this area. This is as far west as I come, but thank you all very much for coming. This is the last stop on a 10-stop tour. We're going to get a sneak peek at this bike, and it's the first time on this tour that this bike has been seen in 5 different states publicly. So, y'all will be some of the first people in public to see this bike. This is a really new concept for us. The idea of an adventure bike that can truly give superbike performance and earn that Ducati badge on the side, but also be a great city bike, a great dirt road bike, and a long distance touring is quite a challenge. When that was the brief given to the designers and engineers, you know, they smile and they think about the fact that that's not done yet. That may be impossible. And then they realize a few minutes later that this is Ducati and we do create dreams, and so that's the idea of this bike. So we want to make sure with this presentation that you understand what the bike is all about, and I'll stick around for any questions, but we want to make sure when you dream of your next adventure that you dream of it on a Ducati. So, the idea, and I think you caught the video, is 4 bikes in one. But not just a little bit here and there. We want a bike that can truly transform itself and be an absolutely great sport bike, a long distance comfortable touring bike, an urban bike capable of roaming around the city and navigating potholes and railroad tracks and everything else you encounter unpredictably in the city. But when you see a dirt road, you got to know what's on the other end, and you have to be able to turn down it and see get down there. So basically, we created the 4 different distinctive riding modes with the electronics of the bike. So the sport mode, to give you a quick brief on it, it's 150 horsepower with the delivery that you'd expect from a sport bike and from a true Ducati power plant. It's going to give you a sport-oriented setup. So if you want to go to a track day, if you like those curvy canyon roads all by yourself, this bike is meant to give you the full Ducati experience. It does have a full 8-level traction control system on it, just like our premium super bikes. And so the sport mode will be factory set to level 3, which is an expert level of traction control. We also have the touring mode next. It's still 150 horsepower. But it's not going to be a punchy sport bike delivery, 150 horsepower. It's going to be a progressive delivery that makes you more comfortable on extremely long days when you may be tired or going through some endurance riding. It is going to increase the comfort of the suspension automatically in this mode and does up the level of traction control for those longer days. The urban riding mode is where it starts to get interesting and very different. We drop the whole bike down to 100 horsepower map. But we also give you an optimum suspension settings for city streets, and then give you a lot more traction control since you're in an unpredictable environment. The next mode is the enduro mode. This isn't meant to be a motocross bike and do the 20-foot jumps through the air like you see on TV. This bike is meant to get riders that are using this bike in an endurance situation down a dirt road and let you complete your adventures. It does give a little bit more ground clearance. And then turns the traction control completely off nearly so that you can float the rear tire around and steer on those dirt roads like the dirt bike riders like to. So, to accomplish this, we obviously had to bring some new technology to the market. Some of the things that are on this bike is it does include a ride-by-wire throttle. So when we uncover the bike, you'll see that there's a traditional cable running down to the throttle bodies, but the electronics take over from there. And that's how we achieve the 3 different maps. So the computer controls the opening of the butterflies in relation to the throttle position so that you can achieve a progressive delivery versus a sport delivery and 100 horsepower versus 150 horsepower. We do have traction control. I mentioned that it's 8 levels. And this is a great time to mention that while each of the 4 modes comes with factory presets, you can get inside of each mode and then customize it for yourself. So, if your traction control setting, you want it a little higher or a little lower in the sports setting, or you want the sports suspension set up but it's raining, so you want to dial in some more traction control. You can do all of that from the dash, and then when you return to that mode on your bike, it's going to stay that way just like you would set it manually. The electronic suspension is also preset in all 4 modes, but you can modify those from the dash also. That's the one thing you cannot do on the fly. To change the suspension settings, you can change the modes on the fly and shut the throttle. As you roll back on the throttle, everything's going to be transforming itself into the next setting. To change settings within a mode, you do have to have both wheels at a full stop. Analog braking system, and I will point out that it's not linked. We're not here to interfere with your riding or tell you how to ride. We're just here to provide the safety for you to ride the way you want. Hands-free ignition is interesting. So the key's in your pocket. You flip the kill switch of the bike and it activates the electronics. Obviously a touring guy instantly worries, well, what if I lose the key out in the middle of nowhere on top of a mountain that falls off? What do I do then? There's actually a button hidden on the bike that you press, activates the electronics, and you enter your personal PIN code that you'll be setting when you take delivery of the bike so that you won't be stuck out anywhere. Or, say it's 5 or 6 years down the road and the battery in the key dies. So you have the key, but it won't communicate to the bike from 6 feet away like it's supposed to. Well, we've accommodated that also. You can actually hold the key up against the front windshield, and the bike will pick up the code of the key to activate the electronics without the PIN code. So, a couple of redundancies made to make this bike a real-world bike. And the 3 engine maps, obviously a little bit new technology for us. And then here's the heart of the difference of this bike, the new Multistrada 11-degree motor. I'm going to show you some specifics about this motor, but in comparison to our super bikes, which are 41-degree motors, here's what that degree number means. That's 11 degrees of crankshaft rotation, where both the intake and the exhaust valve are open at the same time. And what does that do for you? It gives you a much smoother, earlier on power without the surginess of a full-bore superbike motor. So you get the feeling and the nature of the superbike motor, but you get a much more livable power delivery, especially down low. And one of the things that the 41-degree motor, the reason it gives you that feeling of surginess, like it's chomping at the bit when it's in the lower speeds, is the unpredictability of the combustion when both valves are open for that duration. So this eliminates that, makes it a real-world, stand up in the dirt, and ride it like you want to ride it kind of bike. The other things we've done is we've come up with a new manufacturing process that gives us an extremely hard valve seat in the head. And so now, we have the reputation of 7,500 mile valve adjustment intervals and being one of the more expensive bikes to maintain. I've seen our internal assessments of everybody's maintenance schedules and the cost. We're going to drop from the top of that chart almost all the way to the bottom with a new 15,000 mile valve adjustment interval for Ducati. And it's all based on this new 11-degree motor. So, more specifics, here's a little picture just to show you the idea of both valves being open for 11 degrees of rotation. And then this is a graph that's going to compare it to a superbike motor at 41 degrees, showing you the amount of time that both are open compared to the entire rotation versus the new Multistrada 11-degree motor. So the heart of this bike is 150 horsepower, 87.5 foot-pounds of torque, and 3 different engine maps. So here is kind of a visual example of the difference in power delivery between the maps. You can see the blue is the 150 horsepower that comes on a little harder and earlier, like you'd expect from a superbike power plant. The more progressive touring delivery and the 100 horsepower you see are just a little softer in the low end. This is the same type of thing, but to give you a visual in the differences between your throttle opening and your butterfly opening. So this is what we're controlling with the computer to give you that map. The example here is 150 horsepower on the solid white line for the 11-degree motor. And notice how much earlier power and torque start building on this motor and how much smoother. So we're not looking for the peak horsepower. 150 is going to be outstanding and lead the entire market in the adventure bike and touring bike category.